5th June this year, veteran astronauts Sunita Williams and Barry Bush Wilmore got onto a test flight of Boeing's maiden Starliner, a spacecraft or a space capsule as it's called, transporting them to the outer space to the International Space Station or ISS. Now, the International Space Station is a massive spacecraft that is stationed in the outer space, which is basically, it's like a home come research laboratory, and people are stationed there. And these two astronauts went into the ISS.
Yes, Sandhya, I remember reading this, in fact, and the Boeing Starliner with the astronauts on aboard was supposed to reach and dock at ISS and return with the astronauts in about 8 days' time, right? But however, that did not happen, and due to some technical, issues, the astronauts had to stay back in the ISS.
Right. Now, I'll put it in simple terms. I was also reading about what the technical issues were.
Yeah.
So the spacecraft has thrusters that propel the spacecraft, give it orientation and push it towards into the outer space. In the case of the Boeing Starliner, what has happened is there were issues with some gas leaks in these thrusters, and it was widely reported that 5 out of the 28 thrusters gave way. They were not working and they were leaks. Despite repeated attempts at, plugging the irregularities that seem to remain unresolved.
Right. So the Boeing Starliner spacecraft actually returned to the Earth on the 7th of September without Sunita and Barry, right?
Right.
So the NASA also issued a statement that the spacecraft returned without the crew to ensure their safety. So the NASA also issued another statement that the astronauts will remain in the ISS till February to March 2025, and that they will come back only in a SpaceX spacecraft, right? So, and I would also like to share at this point with our viewers that in 2014, NASA awarded contracts to the companies, which is Boeing and SpaceX, as part of its commercial crew program. Now, the contracts were awarded to develop spacecrafts or space capsules to transport astronauts or the crew members to ISS for research work.
Right. We need to understand if there's any law governing space and space exploration and related activities. Especially when it involves humans traveling from Earth to space. Now, literally and figuratively speaking, space is a no man's land, okay? No one country or nation or state can claim exclusive property, space as its exclusive property. Therefore, it comes under the realm of international law, because all activities in space exploration, research, etc., is for the benefit of the entire human.
So space explorations has been going on for centuries, but humans in space, it began in 1960s as such, right? So since then, if you look into, there have been regulations also developed over the time and continue to evolve. So back then, if we look into in the US and USSR, these were the only two players in space. So in 1992, the United Nations, in fact, with the objective of ensuring that all nations benefit from the space explorations, established the Office for Outer Space Affairs. I don't even know how many of them know there is something like this.
Right.
Within the UN Secretariat as such.
Right.
Now, it lists the treaties and the principles governing the space activities. There are about, 5 treaties. Now, the Outer Space Treaty, which is considered the foundation of international space law, this treaty expressly, recognizes and codifies that space is for the benefit for all nations and further prohibits use of nuclear weapons in space.
Right.
So astronauts also shall be, considered as envoys of mankind. So states shall be liable for damage caused by these space objects, and states shall also, avoid anything which is harmful contamination of the space and as well as the celestial bodies.
Right. I'd also like to add the second treaty that you mentioned, of the list of 5 that you mentioned, is called the Rescue Agreement or the Rescue Treaty. Now, if I had to, it elaborates the provision that you mentioned in the Outer Space Treaty about astronauts being considered as envoys of mankind. What it states is expressly that all states, the reference of states here is all nations, all states shall take all possible steps to rescue and assist astronauts in distress, okay, and promptly return them to the launching state, okay, and also take steps to recover objects that return to the Earth, which is outside of their state. Let's say some other country launched a rocket and it came and fell in another country. It is the duty of this country to return the object or the astronaut back. Like that, there are several provisions in the Rescue Treaty.
Now, coming to the Liability Convention, it deals with provisions relating to the states and the liabilities which is caused due to their space missions. So it is either damage to the Earth or other space or any kind of celestial bodies, right? The next one is the Registration Convention. Here it is the treaty which requires countries to register space objects which are launched into the orbit or the outer space. Then if you look into is the Moon Agreement. So here it is a treaty that affirms international cooperation for explorations as well as peaceful uses of outer space and celestial bodies, including the moon.
True.
So, these are the most important agreements or treaties in the outer space.
Yeah. So as you said, now you just detailed about the treaties. There are some additional declarations or principles. If one can visit the UNUSA website, you'll be able to find out. It lays down the principles and declarations because they aid in the implementation of all these 5 treaties. Okay.
Right.
But not just in space law, the United Nations also adopted a law, and I will just read and tell you, a treaty known as the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, the ICESCR, okay? Now that is a treaty to protect the interests of all human beings. Obviously those including ones who with the space as well. And additionally, each nation will have their own constitution, which talks about protecting the rights, individual rights, right to health, right to mental health of each of these individuals, right? Also, I believe that there would be a contract existing between Boeing and NASA, Boeing and the astronauts, and maybe SpaceX and NASA. So all of these contracts would also cover specifically their interests of the astronauts, right?
So this is not the first time that astronauts are stuck in space. There have been previous other instances over the decades. All other astronauts have landed back safely in those cases, except in the Columbia shuttle, which disintegrated and exploded while returning back to Earth, killing everybody, including Kalpana Chawla. So probably that is the reason that NASA is cautious in planning the return of Sunita and Barry. While the NASA is also working on bringing them back, we remain hopeful for their safe return. So this has been our humble attempt to understand and encrypt the space laws. I hope our viewers would have enjoyed watching this. Thank you so much for watching.
Thank you.